Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever or whenever you are. Welcome to this audio guide. Topic is feudalism and manorialism. My name is Mr. David Swanson, Bacon County High School, hanging out in room 1206. And if you're watching this video, it's probably because I wasn't in class or you're not in class and you're catching up on the learning that we've done. So welcome to this audio guide. Now, students in my class, you have a page to do for vocabulary on feudalism, and that's what you should have in front of you. Recommendation is that you listen to this audio guide and then you look at the slides on another tab. Now, if you want to watch me talk about it, the resolution on the screen here is not going to be quite as good as if you pull up the PDF and look at the slides. So that choice is yours. Ready, steady, let's go. I want you to imagine I've given you a blank sheet of paper. Now, I'm not in class to do this today, but I've given you a blank sheet of paper. And on this sheet, the sheet of paper represents land that I've given to you. You must produce something on your land. You must live on your land, and this land is your livelihood. So just think about it. You don't have to do it today. Just think about what would you draw on your land? What would you create on your land? Maybe a house. You have to have a dwelling. Maybe you're agrarian. Maybe you decide to do something with farming. We're in Alma, Georgia, and we're known for blueberries. Maybe build blueberries. In the past, I've had students do what interests them. I've had someone build a dance studio. I've had someone build a baseball field. So what interests you? What is your livelihood? How do you want to make money someday? This is what you draw on your land, grow on your land. A factory is the last one there. Well, here's the plot twist. I gave you the land, and what you produce on it belongs to me. So, yeah, I gave you the land, and I'm going to let you work on it. But what you produce on it belongs to me. So thank you for the dance studio. Thank you for the field of blueberries. Thank you for the baseball stadium. I appreciate you working the land for me. This relationship, what I just described in about 30 seconds, is feudalism in a nutshell. So let's go ahead and look at it a little bit more in depth. A couple of examples of a feudal manor, and we're going to look at this quite in depth today. So feudalism, manorialism, let's go. Next screen you see here is a YouTube video, and I would like you to pause this audio guide to watch this 4-minute history right now. So on our Google Classroom is the link to this video. Pause. And I hope you watch the 4-minute history on feudalism, and it's a good jumping off position for what we're going to talk about in these next 20 minutes as well. I bet you've seen feudalism before. You may not have realized it, but I bet you've seen feudalism on the big screen before, because here's a big fat, for example, Shrek and Shrek 2 and Shrek 3 and Shrek 6, whatever number of sequel they're on right now. Shrek is essentially describing the feudalism system. And you even have Lord Farquaad, right? Lord is a position we're going to talk about over the next few minutes as well. So Shrek, great example of feudalism. And if you've seen Shrek, you've seen feudalism in action. Here's one that people of my age bracket remember well, and I find that students get younger every year and they just don't know this movie anymore, and that's a tragedy. But that is The Princess Bride. The Princess Bride is essentially describing feudalism, or the characters are living inside of feudalism, and with some magic and mystique and mystery as well. But The Princess Bride is essentially feudalism demonstrated on the screen. Braveheart, a true story of warriors in Scotland, William Wallace. Braveheart represents feudalism. And finally, on the funnier side of things, Monty Python and the Holy Grail. You have the soldier class, you have the priestly class, you have peasants, you have kings, you have a feudal manor. So ask your dads about Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and they will know what you're talking about, even if you don't. So you've seen feudalism on the big screen before, and maybe Shrek is the only one you really recognize. This is what we're talking about when we talk about feudalism. So question for you, just think to yourself, what do you think the mega themes of feudalism will be? Well, if you paid attention to our class at all, we've seen world history so far be a struggle for power. So I think people wanting power. We've seen people in power oppress those not in power, and we've seen the heart of all this be money. So these are similar themes that we're going to see as we discuss feudalism: power, oppression, and money. Pretty fair summary of the mega themes of feudalism. So feudalism, why it happened. Okay, as historians, we're always seeking to answer this question. And everything happens for a reason. So why did feudalism happen? Well, go backwards a half step into what you remember about the Roman Empire. As the Roman Empire crumbled, fell, split, people left the cities and moved to the more rural areas. So instead of being compacted into urban centers, they are now populating the countryside, and that is going to set the conditions for feudalism. Roads, the famous roads of the Roman Empire, were no longer maintained and started to crumble. And so people just couldn't travel in quite the same way anymore. And where they settled, they stayed. And instead of traveling across the empire and taking goods and ideas and trade items across the Roman Empire, people now just stayed where they were. And as small as it sounds, that's because the roads were not very well maintained. Hey, Georgia Department of Transportation, pay attention to that. If our highways crumble, we might be stuck. And finally, as a result of that, trade networks changed and collapsed. So the map went from more the Roman Empire being very spread out to, as you look at this map here, and I know it's kind of hard to see on the YouTube video, but on your PDF, you can see this is France inside of the era of feudalism, the 1400s. And each color there represents a lordship, a viceroy, basically a feudal manor. Each color there represents a chunk of governance that is not really unified under a kingship. It's not really unified under the national banner of France. Yeah, these people would say we are French, but each color there, and there's bunches of them, represents almost looks like a county map, right? You look at Georgia and you see the number of counties that we have, almost looks like a county map. Each of these being their own little governance, own little area inside of France, and each one of them representing the expression of feudalism. So no longer unity at the national level, now a whole lot of power being concentrated at much smaller levels. And just as chaotic as that map looks, that's how many different governances there were inside of a single country. Getting to your definitions, let's just go with the simplicity here. What is feudalism? Feudalism is a social structure rooted in an exchange of land for military service, or I like to say land for loyalty. Okay, L and L, let's make it as simple as we can. Feudalism is a social structure that is the exchange of land for loyalty. And that goes up and down the chain. I give you land, you give me loyalty. So L and L. Just like I gave you a blank sheet of paper to start the class, what do you produce? I gave you land. In exchange, you would give me your loyalty. This is the simplest definition of feudalism. A couple of key characters in feudalism. The lord is the highest position. Okay, so there's another L. Lords give land for loyalty. Lords give his trusted men, known as vassals, parcels of land and power, and those vassals will break it down even further to the peasant class. So lords give land for loyalty. L, L, and L. Guys, I can't make a mnemonic any simpler than that. It all starts with the same letter. Lords give land for loyalty. If you haven't written that down yet, you should. Anytime I say it 3 or 4 times, it matters. A great chart here to illustrate exactly that. Land goes down. Okay, the king gives it to the lord to the vassal, the vassals down onto the knights and the peasants. And this particular triangle skips the lordship. So I have put Lord Farquaad there. King to the lord to the vassal, vassals to the knights and the peasants. Land goes downward. Loyalty goes upward. Service or military service, or I'm simplifying it with L's. Lords, land, and loyalty. Feudalism we can need to understand this. Sorry, stammered over my words there. We need to understand feudalism was a social system, because we're going to contrast that with the economic system of manorialism here in just a second. Feudalism was put in place to protect and develop kingdoms. Okay, the king could not possibly govern every square inch of his kingdom, his land. So he parcels out his kingdom to trusted lords. Lords similarly, they couldn't govern every square inch of their lordship. So they parcel out their land to the vassals, and the vassals can't farm every square acre that they're given. They take it all the way down to the peasant level, and Peasants work the land, and quite frankly, they're happy to do so. Okay, the peasant class was just happy to have a roof over their head, food on the table, and it doesn't matter that they're being worked to the bone because at least they were provided for. They work all day, go to sleep, wake up, and do it again. This is my life, but hey, at least I have a life. So the peasantry was very important in feudalism. I'll highlight that a little bit more in a second as well. A great graphic. I'm not going to look at every word here, so you can look at this on your PDF. And similarly, another graphic. I like this one because it throws the church in there as well. And it would be okay to start with the king at the top, but even above the king is the local priests, and at the highest point, the pope. So the church still has power over the monarchy, and then the monarchy, man's government, God, then man. And man's government starts to send land downward and loyalty goes upward. So it is appropriate to look at the church at the top of the social structure here as well. How it all started. Well, following Germanic and Hun invasion, kings established this system to better protect their lands. There's a very weak central authority, and actually the most powerful and most stable system inside of this time frame was the Roman Catholic Church. So we've already had good conversation about Christianity and the Crusades, the Renaissance. We see that the church is still central to power in Europe and inside of feudalism as well. So just another example of the why it started, similar to what I already said. Let's kind of drive through the 5 W's a little bit here. So when, want to place your brain in history here. Well, after the fall of Rome, which was in the late 400s AD or CE, as it says on the screen, feudalism starts to rise. So 500 to about 1500 CE. Okay, that's the scale that we're on now after Jesus died, the CE AD scale. About 1,000 years worth of a system. Obviously, that doesn't mean every single day of the feudal era was identical. Growth things happen. Growth and other things happened along the way, but it was the system of the day for about 1,000 years, where medieval Europe. And the reason I show a knight in shining armor on the screen is because that is what you probably commonly associate with that time period. Monty Python has knights, Braveheart has knights, Shrek has knights. Those movies that I showed you all kind of deal with knights. But I don't want to miss the idea, and this class won't dive into this, but feudalism was also a part of Japan in pretty much the same time frame. Instead of using the word knight, their knight class would have been the samurai. So some people are very interested in Asian history, and unfortunately, the pace of this class just doesn't have time to get all the way into the Japan side of feudalism. But very similarly, where it's also happening in Japan, land is being parceled out in the exact same fashion. And instead of the military class is not called a knight, but it's called a samurai. So the more you know. Moving right along so lords were considered to be great warriors. They had many other warriors supporting them. And those men were called their vassals. So vassals are warriors loyal to a lord. We've looked at the chart a couple times now. We see king, lord, vassal, knight. So the who, this is the cast of characters, lords, vassals, knights, and peasants. The what is land for loyalty. If I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. Feudalism is an exchange from lords giving land for loyalty. L, L, and L. Another vocab word here, component of feudalism, is the oath of fealty. Okay, funny word. The oath of fealty is a promise of loyalty given by the vassal to his lord. So I circle that for a reason, and I'll give you this graphic. Fealty goes up from the vassal to the lord. And I actually dove into some primary sources. The oath of fealty might sound like this. The vassal would take a knee, look to his lord, and it's not exactly like a proposing marriage, but he is submitting himself to the Lord. And he says words similar to these: I promise on my faith that I will in the future be faithful to the Lord, never cause him harm, and will observe my fealty to him completely against all persons in good faith and without deceit. So that was the vassal pledging to the Lord. I have taken a similar oath to the Constitution of the United States in my job as an officer in the United States Army. So oaths are not, they're not an old thing or a new thing. They're just kind of like always been around. And even though it's just words, okay, could he break his oath? Could he go against the Lord? Could he assassinate him? Perhaps. But in the time frame, a man's word was his bond. It was legally binding. So to speak the oath of fealty was to become pledged to your Lord. Guess what? Cool thing. It goes both directions. It's not like the Lord doesn't just sit there and say, ha ha ha, look at all the vassals pledging me fealty. The Lord also gives a pledge of homage to his vassals. So French word there, homage. When you look at that word, break it down. Okay, remember I said this is a language class. We got to understand language. The Latin or Spanish word for man is hombre. Any Spanish speakers in the room? Okay, hombre. Look at this word here, man. Homage is actually the Latin rendering of the word hombre, meaning man. So the oath of homage is pledging to his man, right? The Lord is saying to the vassal, I will be your man for as long as you are loyal to me. And that's not, again, that's not pledging marriage. That's not asking to be into a romantic relationship. Don't make it weird. Homage is saying, I'm your guy, okay? You're giving me loyalty. I'm going to give you protection as well. So the vassal would promise to give aid when called upon, while the Lord would promise to protect his vassal from any external threat. This oath, I'll give you this graphic here, goes down. So fealty goes up, vassal to Lord. Homage goes down, Lord to vassal. I think it's a beautiful two-way relationship. Okay, the Lord isn't just almighty over his vassals. He also has a piece of loyalty to give to his vassals. So pledge goes up, pledge goes down. And the oath of homage may look like this in the ceremony. I become your man from this day forth, and shall bear you faith for the manor, which I claim to hold of you, saving the faith that I owe to our Lord the King. So that first line there, I become your man. Hombre, man, homage. This is an oath of homage. I become your man from this day forth. I know some of you are chuckling because that's maybe something boyfriends and girlfriends say to each other. That's not what the relationship is here. All right, manorialism. Moving right along into vocab here. Manorialism is the economic structure of the time period. Feudalism, social structure. And I just told you about all the relationships, all the levels of the relationship. Manorialism is the economic structure for how pieces of land were actually managed, right? How did they make money off of this land? Feudalism, manorialism, sometimes they're used interchangeably, but they really shouldn't be, okay? And I'm teaching you to be smarter than the average bear. Feudalism, social relationships. Manorialism, economic system in the same time period. So expanding on the definition here, manorialism was a political and economic system defined by the relationship between the owners and the land workers. It concerned the common people of the time, the peasants, as they were the ones providing the labor. Major take on feudalism, okay, and I got a slide for peasants coming up in a second, but feudalism runs on the backbones of the peasantry. The lords cannot possibly work all the land, and there's only one lord. The vassals cannot possibly care for every square inch of the land they've been given. There's only a couple of them under each lord. The power rested in the peasant class. There were more peasants than any other member of any other class. The peasants, if they banded together, would have been much more powerful than all the other classes combined. It's just a matter of them figuring that out. So we'll look at the peasantry here in just a second as well. Simple definition on manorialism, again, an economic system. A manor, okay, break the word down. A manor was a self-sufficient community. You can think of it as a village, right? You might, I'll add one to our big screens here. Maybe Beauty and the Beast. Beauty and the Beast was a manor where you have the castle and then you have the village and all the craftsmen and all the workers. So a manor or a village usually consisted of a castle, a church, homes, and shops. What would happen inside of this manor or village? They would trade goods and services. They would grow enough for sustenance. They would occasionally interact with other manors, but realistically, a manor was self-sufficient. They had enough for themselves inside their own manor. And there's going to be several pictures coming up of what a manor might have looked like. The Lord's Castle is at the high point. Okay, it's the best home in town. The vassals would have the second best structures in town. The peasants or serfs, there's another word for you, means the same thing. They would have a patch of land that they were working, and they lived in, straw roof and dirt floor type of home. So, that's a manor, self-sufficient. Manor definition for you. Manor is a large chunk of land that a person legally owned and granted certain political right, and that person had certain political rights as a result. That person I'm referring to is the lord of the manor. So we already talked about lords in the social structure. Lord of the manor, saying the same thing. A noble title that came with certain rights. One of those rights, the right to attend the royal courts. So the lord would connect to the king, right? Loyal or service goes up, loyalty goes down. Excuse me, I said boop. Land goes down, loyalty goes up. So the lord of the manor is giving his loyalty and his service upward to the king. Gotta keep your L's in order there. There's a couple of interesting facts just about the time period here, just kind of dispel some myths. Life in a castle. We ain't talking Disney princess castles here, all right? We're not talking Walt Disney World Cinderella castle or any of the other stereotypes you might have of life in a castle. Castles were actually built for defense, not comfort. A castle was a dirt floor poor, right? Literally, that's a phrase we use sometimes. Oh, they're so poor, they had a dirt floor. Yeah, castles were a dirt floor poor. Castles were grungy, grimy, hygiene very low inside of a castle. If one person was diseased or ill, that would spread very easily inside the castle. Castles were built for defense, not comfort. So they were very functional. They had parapets where archers could rest. They actually had, I should pull up a picture, apologies. If you ever look at a castle and you see a window that's like a slit, like, well, that's a very small window. Well, who can even see out of that? That's for the archers, just wide enough for them to be able to shoot their arrow out of that slit window. But you'd have to it'd be a pretty precise shot for any projectile to get inside that window. So built for comfort, built for defense, not comfort. And life in the village, it's not like the opening song in Beauty of the Beast where everyone's, selling eggs and bread and Belle's reading a book and, there's a musical background, of course. No, that wasn't your standard life in the village. Most villagers, most peasants lived in small homes, straw roof, dirt floor. They were dirt floor poor as well. I don't know how they really tolerated this next piece, but a lot of times their cooking fire was right in the middle of their chimney-less home. They didn't even have a way for the smoke to escape, and they had their open fire just right in the middle of their straw roof, dirt floor, no chimney home. Pretty nasty. I get the sneezes when I get a little dust in my face. I can't imagine living in those environments. So that's life in the village. I got a little LOL for you here. Let's follow the analogy. Is to isn't, as was is to wasn't, as pez is to tee hee LOL, peasant. Yeah, okay, groan, cringe, got it. Main story of feudalism is this. Feudalism is a way of structuring society around relationships that were based on the holding of land in exchange for services, labor, and loyalty. Land in exchange for loyalty, L and L. A couple pictures as I promised. So this is a great view of what a manor might look like. Body of water, also crucial to life in the manor. They always popped up around a body of fresh water because world historians, water is life. Okay, life itself popped up around water in Mesopotamia. We talked about the significance of the Nile River. Here we have it again. Water is life inside the feudal manor as well. A little bit more illustrated, and you can see the castle, the manor, all that kind of stuff. Show you this again. Let me give you a present day example. I'm always trying to do this. So does feudalism still exist today? Well, if you watch the video, the four-minute intro video, it said that the last feudalism in Europe faded out in, I think it was 2017. What? Yeah, that's so the remnants of feudalism and the legal arrangement of feudalism lasted into the 2000s, and I might not have gotten that year just right, but you watched the video, what about the system itself? Okay, not technically called feudalism, but the way that Major League Baseball operates is in a way feudalism. There's the major league team. We'll go with the Atlanta Braves, right? So the major league team, that'd be the lord, maybe even the king, okay? Definitely the peak of the pyramid. And beneath the king is the AAA team, the Gwinnett Stripers. The double A team, is that the Tupelo Braves? Is that what the Braves double A ball is? Single A, rookie ball, and then there's even independent ball where those ball players are trying to be known and trying to chip their way upward. So in a way, minor league baseball is kind of like feudalism in that everybody's giving loyalty to the major league ball club. And another one here, sometimes students understand this, sometimes they don't. Does anyone's mama buy makeup from the local Mary Kay lady? Mary Kay is a makeup selling business which essentially functions like feudalism. At the top, there's a director. Okay, let's call her the king, queen, as it were. And she's got workers underneath her. So she gives them business. Okay, you get to sell in Alma, you get to sell in Waycross, you get to sell in Douglas. She gives them land, and they give her loyalty. And they actually give her a portion of their profits. So Mary Kay makeup sellers, pretty similar to feudalism in the year 2023. Go home, ask your mom if she wears Mary Kay makeup. Show this picture again for you. I'm going to click through some basic definitions. Okay, if you didn't catch them before, make sure that you catch them on the, because what you're filling out is definitions. So I'm not going to read them word for word on the audio guide here. Make sure that you have the definitions complete before you move on to your last definition. Your last definition is how it all ended. How did feudalism end? Black Death or the bubonic plague is going to be the single reason for the dissolving feudalism across Europe. So let's look at that briefly. Go ahead and pause and watch this video from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And it's another LOL type of a movie, but you can kind of see in a silly way what life was like in a feudal manner. And we really want you to pay attention to the hygiene or lack thereof. So go ahead and pause this video. Watch Monty Python. Okay, hope you did that. Welcome back. And bring out your dead, but I'm not dead yet. The bubonic plague was a time period where so many people died that there was literally a daily cleansing. Bring out your dead, put them on the streets, and we'll take them to the local cemetery for you. So humor is only funny because it's rooted in truth. Okay, this is humor, satire, comedy, but rooted in truth. So let's look at that truth right now. What is the bubonic plague? Well, the medieval Silk Road, which is not something we had a whole lot of time to talk about. We briefly mentioned it inside the Age of Discovery. The Silk Road brought a whole bunch of new things from China to Europe. But one of those things was disease. Okay, so goods, spices, riches, ideas, religion, and disease. And one of these diseases that came along the Silk Road from Asia to Europe that is responsible for killing nearly half of all Europe is what's known as the Black Death. Bubonic plague or Black Death, these are synonymous phrases, and that's what we're going to talk about here right now. About 25 million people are estimated to have died between 1347 and 1351. 25 million people in Europe in 4 years. And of course, the world was much less populated at this time frame. So that is an astronomically high number. If you remember back to one of our first class days, we watched a world population video where it had the yellow dots. Yellow dots represented 1 million people each. This time period was the only time period in world history that the world's population decreased. All the other wars, doesn't matter how many people were dying on the battlefield, the world's population was still increasing. During the time of the bubonic plague, Black Death, the world's population decreased. Only time in world history that the world's population has decreased. It was most felt in Europe, but because the traders from Asia brought it into Europe. And I'm not saying people didn't die elsewhere. I'm going to show you a map here in just a second, and we'll see that the casualties, the deaths, most happened in Europe. So what is the bubonic plague? I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I'm just going to give you my basic understanding right here. It's an infection that takes about 3 to 5 days to incubate in people before they fall ill, and another 3 to 5 days before you die. So receiving the virus, and we all understand COVID, right? We've all come through the COVID era, 2020, very similar. You receive the virus, and you may not know it for 3 to 5 days. Then you start to feel ill, and you got 3 to 5 days left to live. That's how fast it killed its victims. About 80% of the people who contracted the virus died. That is way higher than the COVID-19 death rate. So from the introduction of the plague to a human community, researchers went backwards and tracked this. It's about 23 days before the first person died. The virus could come to the community in a variety of ways. Very often it was through rats. So a diseased rat could enter the community and infect more rats, and more rats go into homes. And once the rats are in the homes, it would actually affect the person. And on average, it's about 23 days before it started to affect people in the community. And once people in the community were affected, a lot of times the whole community was wiped out shortly thereafter. A couple of pictures along the way here, so you can see that it's almost saying that young people never had the chance to get married, right? These brides are going off to their wedding day with a skeleton. People are in bed, ill together. The priest is trying to ward off the bad feelings, or is belief. In a lot of ways, there's belief that there's a religious perspective to why someone got sick. Maybe they weren't following the Lord closely enough, so the priests were involved in trying to ward off the sickness. A couple more details here. When the bubonic plague was left untreated, the plague bacteria invades the bloodstream. That's how it really affected someone. It would multiply inside the bloodstream, rapidly spread throughout the body, and cause severe and fatal septicness in the blood. So it's essentially a poisoning of the blood. In the year 1348, Black Death swept through England, killed millions of people, and this resulted in a diminished workforce. Here's where the story changes for the peasants. From this emerged the peasants who survived were very valuable. There were fewer laborers, okay, so the lords couldn't boss them around as much anymore. The peasants who survived were able to band together and demand a better working wage, better working conditions, and able to kind of climb the social ladder a little bit because there were just fewer of them. And the lords had to respond to that, or else the peasants would go on strike, not work, maybe move, go to the New World. So a lot of reasons that the peasants emerged from the Black Plague stronger. If they survived in the first place, they emerged stronger than when they started. Here's a great map here that shows how it spread. So, the plague area started in Asia, spreads into the Middle East, and you can see how it affects Europe and North Africa as well. So in the interest of the upper class, the English Parliament enacted laws which set maximum wages. This angered the lower classes and actually finally inspired a peasant revolt. Okay, these peasants got looked down upon for decades, up to 100,000 years inside of feudalism. But it was the Black Plague that made them realize their worth. They rebelled against this maximum wage. Today we have a minimum wage, but at this time the Parliament set a maximum wage. So there's a peasants' revolt in 1381. The Black Death left in its wake a period of friction and conflict between the upper classes and the peasantry. The dispute regarding wages led to the peasants' triumph over the manorialism economic system and ultimately ended in the breakdown of feudalism in England. So you might think about it as a win, a big win for the peasantry. So a collision of science and virology and medicine and social studies history. Okay, it all comes together, and the breakdown of feudalism is actually the bubonic plague. So feudalism, why it ended. Here's the big four: growth of trade and towns, the growth of royal power. So instead of decentralized, the royals started to consolidate their power again. The age of exploration, people leaving the farm and finding that there's more to life. And finally, the Black Plague or bubonic plague, the Black Death. All of those are synonymous with each other. This is why it ended. I'll show you this screenshot here of the video. So please watch this National Geographic Plague 101. Very good video, only 4 minutes long. And in summary, to conclude this audio guide, the big summary of feudalism is lords giving land in exchange for loyalty. Land goes down, loyalty goes up. Lords, land, and loyalty. Thank you for listening. I hope you learned something that you didn't know 30 minutes ago. Hey, I miss you guys. I'm at Army National Guard drill time, so it's good to connect with you on video. I'll be back soon. Keep doing the right thing. Thanks for tuning into this audio guide from Room 1206. Mr. Swanson, signing off.